Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is Advanced English Listening Podcast. But as always, we are referring to our format here as a deep dive because we really want to get into the thick of things. So close your eyes for a second. Just indulge me here. Think back to a few hours ago. How did your morning start today?
Oh, that is a dangerous question for a lot of people, I think.
Right. I mean, the very first moments of consciousness. Did you wake up naturally, stretch your body, take a deep breath, and maybe listen to the quiet of your home before your feet even touched the floor?
That sounds like a dream.
Yeah. Or did you do what I caught myself doing just last week? The alarm blares, your eyes aren't even adjusted to the light, and before you've even taken a proper breath, your hand is blindly reaching for the phone on the nightstand.
Which is just pure muscle memory at this point.
Oh, for sure. You pull that bright blue light right up to your face, and within, 4 seconds, you're scrolling, work emails, breaking news, a dozen messages, social media updates.
And instantly your chest tightens.
Yes. Before you have even brushed your teeth, you feel the crushing, suffocating weight of everything you are supposed to be doing today. If that second scenario sounds like your morning, I really want to reassure you. You are sitting right there with the vast majority of the modern world. You are not alone.
That contrast you just painted is incredibly stark, and it gets right to the heart of how we live now. We exist in a global culture that genuinely celebrates and even demands speed. We expect fast food, fast fashion, fast internet, and instant replies to our messages.
We really do.
Over the last few decades, we have somehow collectively decided to measure our human worth and our societal value by how overwhelmed and exhausted we are.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the philosophy of slow living. We want to figure out how you and we, honestly, can escape the relentless exhaustion of the modern rat race.
It is so needed.
But we are also doing something really unique today. It is a 2-for-1 experience. As we explore how to completely shift your daily pace, we are also weaving in an advanced English masterclass. We will be exploring nuanced vocabulary and vivid expressions that you can use to articulate this mindset in your own life.
It feels like a very natural pairing, honestly. To truly understand the slow living movement, you need the right language to internalize it and describe it to others. And I think we need to set the parameters right away because there is a massive misconception about this topic.
Oh, definitely. People hear slow living and they think
laziness. But slow living is not about laziness. It's not about throwing your smartphone into the ocean, quitting your job, and running away to live off the grid in a mountain cabin.
I have to admit, after a long week of meetings, the mountain cabin idea does hold a certain appeal. Just chopping wood and ignoring the world.
It sounds highly romantic, I agree completely. But realistically, that isn't a sustainable solution for most of us. True slow living is about deliberate, intentional choices in a world that relentlessly glorifies speed. It is about taking back the steering wheel of your own life and deciding your own tempo, rather than letting your overflowing inbox dictate your heart rate.
That brings us right to this modern epidemic of busyness, and I really do view it as an epidemic. I noticed this the other day at a dinner with some friends. We sat down, and the first question is always, how have you been?
And let me guess the answer.
Every single person at the table gave some variation of the same response. Oh, just so busy, swamped, back-to-back meetings, barely keeping my head above water.
Yeah, that is the standard script now.
And it hit me that this wasn't just small talk. It was almost a competition. It was the busy Olympics. People literally wear their exhaustion like a badge of honor. They tell you they were working until 2 a.m, and they are subtly waiting for you to applaud them for their dedication.
The sociology behind that dinner table interaction is fascinating. Busyness has completely morphed into a status symbol. If we look back 100 years, conspicuous leisure was the ultimate status symbol. Having immense free time meant you were wealthy and important.
Because you didn't have to toil in a factory all day.
Spot on. But today, particularly in Western corporate culture, that is inverted. Researchers from top-tier institutions like Columbia, Georgetown, and Harvard Business School have studied this phenomenon extensively.
And what did they find?
They found that when people openly describe themselves as very busy or overworked, society actually perceives them as more competent, more ambitious, and more important than those who have visible free time.
Wow. So we are socially rewarded for burning ourselves out.
We are. We have internalized this cultural script to such an intense degree that we feel profound guilt when we rest. The prevailing anxiety is, if we're not actively producing something or consuming something, we're falling behind.
That guilt is so real. We are terrified of unstructured time. Have you ever noticed what happens when you're waiting in line at the grocery store? If there are even 30 seconds of downtime, every single person pulls out their phone.
Yep, instantly filling the void with stimulation.
But I want to ask you about the biological toll of this, because intuitively it feels terrible. Our bodies surely weren't built to sustain this kind of relentless high-speed pressure.
You are undeniably correct. Our biology is actively fighting against this lifestyle. If we zoom out and look at human evolution, our bodies were brilliantly designed to handle stress, but only in short, intense bursts.
Like running from a bear.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Right.
Think of our ancient ancestors. Their stress was acute and immediate, spotting a predator, for example. The brain signals the adrenal glands, the body spikes a massive dose of cortisol and adrenaline, your heart rate accelerates, you run, you survive.
And then what happens?
Crucially, the threat passes and the stress hormones dissipate. Your nervous system resets to baseline. It is a brilliant survival mechanism.
But our modern threats don't go away after a quick sprint.
That is the core issue. Modern stress is chronic. It is sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic when you are already late. It is a flood of emails that never stops, even on weekends. It is the looming anxiety of inflation and financial worry.
It is just a constant hum of panic.
Yes, this low-grade panic keeps our cortisol levels permanently elevated. And the medical literature is very clear on the consequences of chronic cortisol exposure. It actively weakens the immune system, causes severe sleep disruption, significantly heightens the risk of cardiovascular disease, and drives skyrocketing rates of clinical anxiety and burnout.
Beyond the physical damage, it feels like it erodes the actual texture of our lives. When I'm constantly rushing, I notice my relationships suffer first. The connections become incredibly wide, but incredibly shallow.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I will send a quick thumbs up emoji instead of calling a friend to actually hear their voice. The depth is gone.
That shallowness extends to our cognitive abilities as well, particularly our creativity and joy. For anyone doing knowledge work, artistic work, or even just trying to problem solve in their daily life, the human brain physically requires boredom.
Boredom. Really?
It does. Neuroscientists refer to this as the default mode network. When you are doing nothing, when you are daydreaming, staring out a window, or taking a shower, that is when your brain works behind the scenes to synthesize new information, connect disparate ideas, and generate original thoughts.
So that is why we always get our best ideas in the shower.
No doubt about it. When every single minute of your day is scheduled or filled with a podcast or a video, your brain is starved of the quiet space and needs to be inventive. You are blinding yourself to small joys, like just noticing the smell of morning coffee.
I want to introduce a metaphor here for you, the listener, because I think it perfectly captures what we're losing. Imagine you are driving down a stunning, winding mountain highway in the Alps.
A beautiful set.
Right. But if you have your foot heavily on the gas pedal and you are speeding at 120 kilometers per hour, what is your experience? Your hands are gripping the wheel until your knuckles are white. Your eyes are locked in a dead stare on the asphalt directly in front of you.
Everything outside your window is just a chaotic blur in your peripheral vision.
Yes, you arrive at your destination quickly, sure, but you have seen absolutely nothing of the journey.
Building on that visual, contrast that high-speed sprint with taking the exact same road, but choosing to drive slowly. You decide to take the scenic route, you roll the windows down.
Because you aren't fighting for control of a speeding vehicle.
Right. You suddenly notice the bright purple wildflowers growing on the hillside. You feel the temperature of the air drop as you pass through a shaded valley. You can actually hear the sound of a freshwater stream rushing over the rocks nearby.
You might even pull over at a lookout point and just stand in awe of the mountains.
It is the exact same road.
Right.
But the experience of the journey is completely transformed.
Same road, completely different journey. That imagery leads us perfectly into our first vocabulary integration for the listener. To articulate the shift from that fast car to the scenic route, we want to look at 4 key English concepts: intentional, mindful, pace, and autopilot.
Let's break those down.
Rather than giving you textbook definitions, let's explore how they feel in real life. When we talk about living on autopilot, we are using an aviation metaphor. A pilot turns on autopilot so the plane flies itself without active thinking.
So in our lives, living on autopilot means you are just going through the motions out of pure habit.
Have you ever driven all the way home from work and realized you don't actually remember the commute? That is autopilot. You are physically there, but mentally absent.
Slow living is the active rejection of that autopilot state. And the antidote to autopilot is becoming intentional.
How would you describe that for our learners?
When you do something intentionally, You are making a conscious, deliberate choice. It is the opposite of accidental or habitual. For example, rather than mindlessly scrolling through your phone while eating lunch at your desk, an intentional choice would be closing the laptop, walking to a park bench, and focusing solely on your meal. You are taking back control of your actions.
Which ties directly into the third word, being mindful. This word gets thrown around a lot in wellness spaces, but at its core, being mindful means being intensely aware of what you are sensing and feeling in the present moment, without interpretation or judgment.
It is about noticing the details.
Exactly. I mean, that is it right there. Mindful eating isn't a diet. It is noticing the crisp texture of an apple, the sweetness, the sound of the crunch. It is forcing your brain to inhabit the current second rather than projecting into the future.
And all of this fundamentally alters your pace. That is our fourth word. Pace is simply the speed or rate at which something happens or develops. The pace of modern city life can feel entirely overwhelming.
It really can.
The slow living movement is, at its foundation, about recognizing that you have the agency to dictate your own pace, regardless of how fast everyone around you is running.
Speaking of the slow living movement, I was doing some reading on its origins, and I was genuinely surprised. I assumed it started recently with wellness bloggers or productivity experts, but apparently it started over a burger in Italy. What is the story there?
The origin story is brilliant because it is so deeply rooted in culture and passion. It goes back to a protest in Rome in 1986. A prominent journalist and activist named Carlo Petrini was absolutely incensed because McDonald's was opening right at the base of the iconic Spanish Steps in the historical center of Rome.
I can just imagine the culture clash, the smell of fast food French fries wafting over ancient Roman architecture.
It was viewed as a profound cultural insult. For Petrini, this wasn't just about a fast food restaurant opening. It represented a direct assault on the Italian way of life. He saw it as the beginning of the end for long, lingering family meals.
And losing the connection to local food.
Yes, he feared the loss of handmade pasta that takes hours to prepare, and the abandonment of carefully sourced regional ingredients in favor of mass-produced, homogenized speed.
So what did he do?
He organized a protest, and famously, the protesters didn't throw rocks. They handed out massive bowls of traditional penne pasta to the crowd to remind them of what they were sacrificing.
That is the most Italian protest I have ever heard of, handing out pasta as an act of rebellion.
It was incredibly effective. From that single, localized protest, a massive ripple effect occurred. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it led to the founding of an organization called Slow Food International.
How big is that today?
Today, that organization operates in over 160 countries. Their mission is to protect local food cultures, preserve biodiversity, and promote the idea that food should be grown cleanly and eaten thoughtfully. But what is truly remarkable is how that philosophy didn't remain confined to the kitchen.
Right. It bled into almost every other aspect of life. We start seeing the slow prefix attached to everything. I've read a lot recently about slow fashion.
That is a major one.
A fast fashion industry is notorious for churning out incredibly cheap, trendy clothing at a devastating environmental and human cost, only for those clothes to end up in a landfill 3 months later. Slow fashion flips that entirely. It is the conscious choice to buy fewer items, but ensuring those garments are ethically made, durable, and classic enough to wear for a decade.
We see the same shift with slow travel. The traditional modern vacation is often a frantic checklist. You book a 14-day tour that stops in 10 different European cities. You spend half your time dragging a suitcase through train stations, taking quick photos of monuments, and you return home more exhausted than when you left.
That sounds like a punishment, not a holiday.
Slow travel advises the exact opposite. You rent a small apartment in one single village for a month. You frequent the same local bakery every morning, you learn a few words of the language, and you achieve deep cultural immersion.
And there are even movements like slow education, which pushes back against testing children relentlessly and instead allows them to learn through play and natural curiosity. And of course, slow money, removing pressure from short-term profits and investing sustainably. This brings us to a couple of really important words for our listeners: sustainable and nourishment.
Let's look at sustainable first. In a broad sense, if something is sustainable, it means it can be maintained at a certain rate or level for a very long period without causing damage. In environmental terms, it means not depleting natural resources.
But how do we apply that to our own lives?
Applied to your personal life, it asks a critical question. Can you keep up your current pace of working and living for the next 20 years without breaking down? If the answer is no, your lifestyle is unsustainable. Burnout is the ultimate proof of an unsustainable pace.
I love how you applied that to personal energy. And that pairs beautifully with nourishment. We usually use nourishment to talk about the physical substances necessary for growth, like vitamins and minerals in food. A bowl of slow-cooked lentil stew provides nourishment, whereas a bag of potato chips just provides empty calories.
But in advanced English, we use this metaphorically all the time.
We do. A deep, meaningful conversation with a friend provides nourishment for your soul. Scrolling through social media for 2 hours is the mental equivalent of junk food. It leaves you feeling empty. Slow living is the pursuit of true nourishment in all areas of life.
A common critique is that this all sounds lovely in theory, but highly abstract. How do we translate the desire for nourishment into actual daily reality? To understand the mechanics of this lifestyle, we can look at the 5 distinct pillars that support the slow living philosophy.
Let's get into the practical side. Pillar 1 is mindfulness. We touched on this earlier, but I want to bring up a specific study that blew my mind when I was preparing for this deep dive. Researchers at Harvard University developed an app to track people's thoughts throughout the day.
Oh, the mind-wandering study.
Yes! They found that human beings spend roughly 47% of their waking hours mind-wandering. Almost half of our lives are spent physically present in one location, while our brains are entirely somewhere else.
And what did the researchers conclude about the emotional state of the participants during that mind-wandering?
That is the kicker. The study explicitly linked mind-wandering to unhappiness. Even if people were thinking about something neutral, they were less happy than if they were fully focused on whatever mundane tasks they were doing in the present moment. We're literally thinking ourselves into misery by constantly replaying past regrets or projecting future anxieties.
That data highlights why mindfulness is the foundational pillar. It isn't just about sitting on a meditation cushion. It is about aggressively anchoring yourself in reality. It is the radical act of walking the dog without a podcast in your ears. Simply feeling the tension of the leash and listening to the wind.
The phrase we want our listeners to internalize here is to be present. When you say, I need to be more present for my family, it means you're committing to giving them your undivided, focused attention, rather than nodding along while secretly thinking about a work email.
That brings us to pillar 2, simplicity. The core mantra here seems to be less, but better. And this isn't about performing a sterile, extreme version of minimalism where you only own one plate and sleep on the floor. It is about understanding the psychological weight of clutter.
I feel that weight every time I look at my desk.
The cognitive load of our environment is immense. When you are sitting in a room filled with piles of unread mail, clothes draped over chairs, and 10 tabs open on your computer screen, your brain is constantly processing that visual noise. It creates a low-level background stress.
Organizing consultants, like the famous Marie Kondo, tapped into a profound psychological truth with her simple filtering question: does this spark joy?
That question changes everything. If an item or even a commitment on your calendar does not serve a practical purpose or bring you genuine happiness, it is simply draining your energy. We have to clear the calendar for spontaneity.
I really resonate with applying simplicity to the calendar. The vocabulary phrase I love for this is to pare down. K-A-R-E. It paints such a clear visual, doesn't it? Like you are taking a small knife and carefully carving away the excess bark from a branch until you are left with only the strongest, solid core of the wood.
That visual is perfect. When you pare down your schedule, you are stripping away the superficial obligations, the networking events you dread, the meetings that could have been an email, leaving only the core activities that actually matter to you. You're creating white space in your life.
Which naturally leads to pillar 3. Connection. And here we hit the great tragic paradox of the modern age. Through our phones, we have never been more hyper-connected to the rest of the globe. Yet, sociological data consistently shows we are experiencing an epidemic of loneliness and isolation.
The paradox exists because we have traded depth for breadth. Our brains, from an evolutionary standpoint, are only capable of maintaining a limited number of stable social relationships, a concept known as Dunbar's number, which maxes out around 150 people.
But on social media, people have thousands of followers.
And that is the problem. Today, we are trying to manage parasocial relationships with thousands of strangers online. Slow living insists that it is infinitely more fulfilling to have a handful of true, close friends who know your character deeply, rather than 5,000 digital followers who only know a highly curated, filtered version of your life.
The vocabulary expression we use for this in English is to nurture a relationship. Think of a friendship exactly like a garden. You can't just throw seeds on the dirt, walk away for 6 months, and expect a beautiful harvest.
You have to water it.
You have to pull the weeds. You have to invest time and care into its growth over seasons. You must nurture it. Sending a like on a photo is not nurturing. Showing up with coffee when a friend is having a hard day is...
Pillar 4 shifts our perspective outward, into the physical world. Nature. We must confront the evolutionary mismatch of our modern habitat. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human nervous system developed outdoors, attuned to the rhythms of the sun, the weather, and the seasons.
And now?
Today, we spend upwards of 90% of our lives inside climate-controlled boxes, staring at flat, glowing screens under harsh fluorescent lights. It is a radical departure from our biological home.
I was reading about how the Japanese medical system addresses this, and it is fascinating. They have a recognized practice called Shinrin-yoku, which translates directly to forest bathing. I initially thought it meant swimming in a lake, but it doesn't involve water at all.
What does it involve?
It involves walking slowly through a forest and consciously engaging all 5 senses. You look at the fractal patterns of the tree branches. You touch the rough bark. You breathe in the scent of the damp soil.
And the physiological response to that practice is measurable and astonishing. Trees emit organic compounds called phytoncides to protect themselves from insects and rot. When humans breathe in these compounds during a forest walk, our bodies respond beautifully.
The blood pressure drops, right?
It significantly lowers blood pressure, reduces cortisol production, and actually increases the activity of our immune system's natural killer cells. The phrase that beautifully captures this process is to ground yourself.
That is such a good phrase for our learners.
When you feel scattered, frantic, or overwhelmed by abstract digital problems, you step outside to ground yourself. You physically connect with the earth to stabilize your turbulent mind.
That brings us to the final support structure, Pillar 5, gratitude. Now, I used to be a little skeptical of this one because the internet has turned gratitude into somewhat of a toxic positivity cliche, just smile and ignore your problems. But the science behind it is incredibly robust.
It is entirely separate from toxic positivity. Human beings have a well-documented psychological trait called the negativity bias. As psychologist Rick Hansen famously described it, the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones.
Because remembering a threat kept us alive.
For sure. We hold on to insults and threats because, historically, remembering where a lion attacked us was vital. Remembering a pretty sunset did not save our lives. Our brains are wired to scan for danger.
So gratitude is basically hacking that evolutionary glitch.
You hit the mark. Prominent researchers like Robert Emmons have conducted long-term studies showing that individuals who keep a gratitude journal, simply writing down 3 specific good things that happened each day, can increase their baseline level of happiness by up to 25%.
Just from writing things down.
Yes, it is the conscious discipline of forcing your brain to acknowledge the good that exists alongside the difficult.
The idiom we use in English for this practice is to count your blessings. It means to deliberately take inventory of the positive elements in your life. You might say, it has been an incredibly stressful month at work, but when I sit down and count my blessings, my health, my family, a warm home, I realize how fortunate I am.
So we have these 5 powerful pillars: mindfulness, simplicity, connection, nature, and gratitude. But philosophy is useless unless it is applied. Let us explore what slow living actually looks like in practice on a mundane Tuesday afternoon.
Let's start in a place we all visit every day, the kitchen. Imagine it is a chilly Sunday evening. You are hungry. The path of least resistance, the fast path, is to grab a frozen processed meal, throw it in the microwave for 3 minutes, and eat it standing up while scrolling through your phone. You consume calories, but you experience nothing.
Now, contrast that with the slow path. You decide to make a soup.
And the process itself becomes the event. You wash the vegetables. You notice the vibrant, deep orange color of the carrots as you peel them. You hear the rhythmic, satisfying thwack of the knife hitting the wooden cutting board.
The scent of onions and garlic sizzling in olive oil fills the kitchen.
You are entirely immersed in a sensory experience.
And you are utilizing some wonderful advanced English vocabulary in that scenario. By preparing the meal this way, you are making it from scratch. This idiom means to build or create something from the very beginning, using basic raw ingredients, rather than starting with something pre-made or packaged.
So no canned soup here?
None at all. And once those ingredients are in the pot, you let the soup simmer. To simmer means to cook a liquid gently, keeping it just below the boiling point. It is a beautiful metaphor for patience. You cannot rush a simmering soup by blasting it with high heat. You will ruin the ingredients. The flavors only deepen with time.
Now, It is easy to imagine slow living in a cozy kitchen on a Sunday. But what happens on Monday morning? This is where we run into a massive myth. I have heard people argue that if you adopt a slow living mindset, you will become a terrible, unproductive, lazy employee who gets fired.
That is perhaps the most dangerous misunderstanding of the entire movement. Slow living at work does not mean missing deadlines or ignoring responsibilities. It actually means fiercely protecting the quality of your output. We can look to the concept of deep work, popularized by a prominent computer science professor.
What does that entail?
Deep work is the professional practice of doing fewer, highly cognitively demanding tasks with absolute, unbreakable focus.
As opposed to what most of us do, which is shallow multitasking.
I agree completely. What is striking is the contrast with shallow multitasking. The modern worker often tries to write a complex report while simultaneously checking their email inbox every 5 minutes, keeping half an eye on a team chat channel, and occasionally glancing at their phone.
Which feels productive, but isn't.
The context switching involved in that multitasking fractures your attention and destroys your efficiency. When you slow down, eliminate distractions, and focus entirely on one single task for a dedicated block of time, you produce significantly higher quality work in far less time.
The phrase we need here is to prioritize ruthlessly. When you are ruthless, you show no pity or mercy. In a professional context, prioritizing ruthlessly means being intensely strict and unapologetically decisive about what actually deserves your limited time and attention. You have the courage to ignore the noise and focus on the vital few tasks that move the needle.
We see that same transformative effect when we apply the slow philosophy to human relationships. Consider a scenario where you meet a friend for coffee. If your phone is sitting face up on the table between you, it is acting as a physical barrier.
Even if the screen is dark.
Even if it is silent, its presence signals that your attention is divided and could be pulled away at any second. But if you both physically put your phones away, out of sight in your bags, you create the psychological safety required for a heart-to-heart.
I love that expression. A heart-to-heart is a sincere, intimate, and intensely honest conversation. It is when you drop the small talk about the weather and truly discuss your fears, your hopes, or your struggles. You cannot have a heart-to-heart while checking text messages. It demands the slow, unhurried offering of your full presence.
It undeniably does. And we can apply the same lens to how we explore the world. We discussed the exhaustion of the 14-day multi-country tourist sprint earlier. Contrast that with a slow travel alternative. Let's say you rent a tiny weathered apartment in a quiet coastal village in Portugal for 3 weeks.
Paint that picture for us.
You wake up without an alarm. You walk down cobblestone streets to buy fresh bread from the local baker, using the few phrases of Portuguese you have slowly learned. You spend the afternoon reading on a balcony overlooking the sea.
No running to catch a tour bus.
You don't take 100 blurry photos of famous statues to post online. Instead, you build vivid, tactile memories of the salt air and the taste of the local espresso. The phrase for this experience is to immerse yourself in something. It means to become completely deeply involved in your environment. You aren't just skimming the surface as a frantic spectator. You are immersing yourself, letting the culture steep into you like a tea bag in hot water.
Okay, this brings us to a very special segment for you, our listener. We call this the Learner's Special, Slow Learning. Because if you are utilizing this deep dive to improve your English fluency, the slow living philosophy is going to completely revolutionize how you study.
The approach most language learners take is often frantic and ultimately counterproductive. They are desperate for quick results, so they adopt an exhausting pace. They download 10 different gamified language apps. They purchase 3 heavy, intimidating grammar textbooks. They subscribe to 5 different YouTube channels, and they try to force themselves to study for 2 grueling hours every single day after a full day of work.
And what inevitably happens? Within 3 weeks, the motivation completely collapses. They are burned out, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information, and they quit, convinced they simply aren't good at languages. That is the fast food approach to learning. It spikes your energy and then leaves you sick.
The slow method is infinitely more sustainable and effective. It involves severely paring down your resources. Choose just one English novel that you genuinely want to read for pleasure. Not a textbook, a real story. Read it for 20 minutes a day.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly that. When you find a beautiful sentence, write it down by hand in a notebook. The physical act of writing engages the motor cortex in your brain, helping to cement the vocabulary in a way that typing on a keyboard simply doesn't. And when you practice speaking, you speak slowly, without the paralyzing fear of making mistakes, understanding that errors are just the raw materials of eventual fluency.
The proverb you absolutely must pack in your suitcase for this language journey is, Rome wasn't built in a day. It is the ultimate expression for slow, deliberate progress. Great things, complex things, majestic things like mastering the nuances of the English language take time. They cannot be rushed or hacked. You have to learn to enjoy the feeling of laying the bricks, day by day.
As we discuss the undeniable benefits of this lifestyle, it is crucial that we confront the skeptics. There is a lot of cultural resistance to slowing down.
There really is. People get defensive. So, let's do a rapid-fire myth-busting session. I will throw out the most common criticisms I hear about slow living, and you provide the reality check. Ready?
I am more than ready. Let us clear the air and dispel these misconceptions.
Myth number 1. Slow living is just a very trendy, aesthetic excuse for being lazy and lacking ambition.
The reality is that true slow living requires fierce, relentless discipline. Laziness is entirely passive. Laziness is lying on the couch, letting the hours slip away while mindlessly scrolling through a feed. Slow living is highly active. It takes incredible willpower and ambition to resist the overwhelming societal pressure of busyness.
It is swimming against the current.
It requires strength to put the phone in another room, to sit down with a difficult book, or to stay focused on a single meaningful piece of work without seeking a quick dopamine hit from a distraction. Slowing down is hard work.
Myth number 2. This philosophy is only for the highly privileged and the rich. It's very easy to live slowly if you have a massive trust fund, a nanny, and you don't have to work a demanding job to pay rent.
This is perhaps the most pervasive and understandable misunderstanding. It assumes slow living is a luxury product you buy, rather than a mindset you adopt. Yes, severe financial stress and systemic poverty make every single aspect of life harder, and we cannot ignore that reality. However, slowing your internal pace does not require wealth.
Could you give an example?
Consider a single mother working 2 demanding jobs to make ends meet. If she chooses to spend 10 completely focused, mindful minutes reading a story to her child before bed, leaving her phone in the kitchen, and giving her child her undivided presence, she is practicing slow living in its purest form.
That is powerful.
Or a struggling university student who decides to cook a humble, inexpensive bowl of rice and beans from scratch, rather than eating fast food while studying. They are practicing slow living. It is about the intentional choices you make within the specific constraints of your current circumstances.
That reframing is so empowering. Okay, myth number 3. Slow living is fundamentally anti-technology. To truly live slowly, you have to become a hermit, throw away your smartphone, and cancel your internet service.
Reality check. Technology itself is morally neutral. It's a remarkable tool, but a terrible master. The slow living movement does not ask you to smash your laptop. It asks you to make technology serve your goals rather than hijacking your attention.
So setting limits.
It means diving into your settings and turning off every single push notification that isn't from a real human being trying to reach you. It means choosing to use the internet to have a high-quality hour-long video call with an old friend living overseas, rather than spending that exact same hour doom-scrolling through an algorithm designed to make you angry. You control the machine. The machine doesn't control you.
And finally, myth number 4. Slow living is inherently boring. We are addicted to speed because it is exciting. If you aren't always hustling or consuming content, you will go out of your mind with sheer boredom.
The reality is the exact opposite of that assumption. Rushing is what creates the blur. When you rush through your days, everything looks the same, tastes the same, and feels the same. Slowing down is what actually reveals the vivid, rich textures of life.
The details emerge.
When you eat slowly, you actually taste the complex spices in your food. When you listen slowly, you actually hear the subtle tone of voice your partner is using, revealing how their day truly went. Boredom usually stems from doing too many shallow things without paying deep attention to any of them. Slow living makes the ordinary, mundane world utterly fascinating.
What's truly striking about that is how universal this realization is. We aren't inventing a new lifestyle trend here. We're simply remembering ancient wisdom. Cultures all across the globe have perfected variations of this philosophy for centuries, long before the invention of the smartphone.
Looking globally provides such a rich, diverse well of inspiration. Every culture adapts the need for slower pacing to its own unique climate and history. Let us analyze a few of these distinct cultural psychologies.
Let's start in Scandinavia, specifically Denmark, with a concept that became incredibly popular worldwide a few years ago, hygge. Most people just think of it as buying expensive candles and thick woolen socks. But it goes so much deeper than interior design.
It does. Hygge is fundamentally about the deliberate cultivation of cozy psychological contentment. Denmark has notoriously dark, harsh, and isolating winters. Hygge developed as a cultural survival mechanism against the cold and the dark. It is the active creation of warm, intimate atmospheres.
So it is more about the feeling than the candles.
Yes, it involves soft lighting and hot drinks, but psychologically, it is about social safety. In a true Hygge gathering, controversial topics, boasting about your career or complaining about work are left at the door. It is a dedicated sanctuary of simple, quiet company and equality.
Then we travel south, to the warmth of Italy, for La Dolce Vita, the sweet life. If Hygge is about cozy survival, La Dolce Vita is the vibrant cultural mandate to actively savor life's sensory pleasures. It is the unapologetic 2-hour lunch with wine, where business is not discussed.
It is the evening passeggiata.
Right, where the entire town, from toddlers to grandparents, comes out just to stroll through the central piazza. They aren't walking to get to a destination or to burn calories. They are walking simply to exist in community, to see and be seen, to talk and to breathe. They have another brilliant phrase, il bel far niente, which translates to the beauty of doing nothing. Doing nothing is elevated to an art form.
Shifting geographically to Japan, we find the profound, aesthetically driven philosophy of wabi-sabi. This is a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. In modern Western culture, we are stressed because we are constantly chasing an unattainable, flawless perfection in our looks, our homes, our careers. Wabi-sabi is the spiritual recognition that authentic beauty is actually found in imperfection and impermanence.
The classic physical manifestation of that is kintsugi, right? The pottery repair technique.
That is the perfect example. If a cherished ceramic bowl falls and shatters, you don't throw it in the trash in frustration. And you don't try to seamlessly glue it back together to hide the damage. Instead, the artisan repairs the cracks using a lacquer dusted with powdered gold or silver.
That sounds beautiful.
The repair itself is illuminated. The crack makes the bowl more beautiful and valuable because it now possesses a history. It tells a story of survival. It is the ultimate rejection of stressful, disposable perfectionism.
Moving back to Scandinavia, Sweden has a guiding principle called lagom. It translates roughly to not too much, not too little, just the right amount. It is the active, daily pursuit of equilibrium. It permeates their entire society. You don't take a ridiculously massive slice of cake, but you don't deny yourself a piece either.
You work hard, but working overtime is actually frowned upon because it implies you are inefficient or unbalanced. It is the Goldilocks principle applied to life, finding the sweet spot of sustainability.
And finally, Norway gives us a concept deeply tied to Pillar 4. Friluftsliv, which translates to open-air living. Norway has incredibly dramatic, often punishing geography and weather. Friluftsliv is the deeply ingrained cultural belief that spending time immersed in the outdoors is fundamentally essential to human happiness and spiritual well-being, regardless of the season.
They have a saying about that, don't they?
They have a saying that I absolutely love, and I try to remind myself of it every winter. There is no bad weather, only bad clothing.
It is a brilliant mindset shift. It removes the excuse to stay indoors on the couch. It forces you to bundle up, step outside, and connect with the raw power of nature, realizing that the biting fresh air is invigorating and healing in itself.
No bad weather, only bad clothing. Okay, so we have traveled the world, we've busted the corporate myths, we've analyzed the neurobiology, and we've learned a wealth of new vocabulary. Let's bring all of this lofty philosophy right down to earth. If you are listening to us right now, commuting to a stressful job or standing in a messy kitchen and thinking, yes, I desperately want this, but my life is chaotic, we have you covered. Here is a gentle, step-by-step, absolutely zero pressure guide to changing your pace starting today.
Step 1 is the most crucial, and thankfully, the easiest.
Yeah.
Observe without judgment. Before you attempt to change a single habit or delete a single app, just watch yourself like a curious scientist. For the next 3 days, notice your own baseline. How fast do you actually chew your food? When you stop at a red light, how many seconds does it take for your hand to instinctively reach for your phone?
When you are talking to your partner, are you actually listening or just planning what you will say next?
Do not criticize yourself. Simply gather the raw data of your own life. Awareness must always precede change.
Step 2. Choose just one area of your life to slow down. Please, do not try to overhaul your entire existence by tomorrow morning. Waking up and trying to meditate for an hour, cook every meal from scratch, and delete all your social media simultaneously will just create a massive new source of stress. Pick one single bottleneck. If your mornings are a chaotic disaster of rushing, yelling, and spilling coffee, start there. Wake up just 15 minutes earlier to sit in the quiet. Just one small change.
Step 3 involves elevating your routines by creating small rituals. A routine is a utilitarian action you have to do to survive, like brushing your teeth or making coffee.
All right.
A ritual is an action you deliberately assign emotional meaning to. You can turn a routine into a ritual simply by bringing presence to it.
Like having tea.
It could be making a cup of herbal tea at 3 in the afternoon and drinking it without looking at a screen, or committing to a strict 10-minute walk around the block immediately after lunch. These small daily anchors protect you from being entirely swept away by the momentum of a hectic day.
Step 4 is a tough one, especially for people pleasers, but it is an absolute superpower. Practice saying no to protect your peace. Every single time you say yes to an obligation you don't actually have the time or energy for, you are silently saying no to your own rest, your own family, and your own well-being. And the specific vocabulary phrase we have for you here is to set boundaries.
Which is vital.
A boundary is a property line. Setting boundaries means establishing firm, clear limits on what behavior you will accept, how many hours you will work, or what responsibilities you will take on. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is the fundamental architecture of a sustainable life.
Step 5 focuses on the digital realm. Reduce your consumption. Go into your phone settings and look at your screen time report. The real number will likely shock you. Then slowly implement digital boundaries. Unfollow social media accounts that routinely make you feel rushed, inadequate, or angry.
Clear out the digital clutter.
Step 6 goes hand in hand with this. Aggressively seek out nature. Even if you live in a dense, concrete, urban environment, find a park bench. Look at the texture of the clouds. Reconnect your overloaded sensory system to the physical world.
And step 7, the final step. Be patient with yourself. You are attempting to unlearn decades of intense societal conditioning. You are going to have days where you fall right back into rushing, panicking, and living on autopilot. When that happens, the expression to comfort yourself with is, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
A very common but important phrase.
A sprint is a short, exhausting, all-out race. A marathon is a long, steady endurance event. You are in this process for the long haul. Pace yourself accordingly.
Before we conclude our discussion, let us consolidate our final vocabulary expansion for the listener. These are rich, advanced English words that beautifully capture the essence of everything we've discussed today. First, the verb to savor. This means to enjoy food or an experience slowly in order to appreciate it completely. You devour a fast food burger, but you savor a fine piece of dark chocolate, letting it melt on your tongue.
Next is to unwind. Think of a tightly wound spring that is under immense pressure. Unwinding is the process of gradually relaxing after a period of high stress or tension. After a 12-hour shift at the hospital, I need an hour of total quiet on the porch to just unwind. We also have the noun contentment.
How would you describe that?
Contentment is a state of deep, peaceful satisfaction with your life as it currently is. It is very different from explosive, fleeting happiness. It is a quiet, steady, enduring joy.
Another beautiful adjective is wholesome. This describes something that is inherently good for your physical, mental, or moral well-being. It is pure and uncorrupted. A home-cooked family meal, a long walk in the woods with a dog, reading a classic book. These are wholesome activities. And engaging in wholesome activities often leads to serenity, which is the ultimate state of being utterly calm, peaceful, and entirely untroubled by the chaos of the outside world.
We also want you to learn the phrasal verb to let go. This is the psychological and emotional act of stopping yourself from holding on to control, past anger, or future anxiety. You simply open your hands and let the stress fall away. And finally, a slightly more informal conversational idiom for your toolkit: to slow your roll.
I love that one.
If a friend or a colleague is panicking, talking too fast, and rushing around the office, you can smile gently and say, hey, slow your roll. We have plenty of time to get this done. It is a friendly command to dial back the intensity.
Those words, savor, unwind, contentment, wholesome, serenity, let go, slow your roll. They aren't just vocabulary words to memorize for an exam. They are the linguistic building blocks of a fundamentally calmer, richer life. And that brings us to the ultimate lesson, the beautiful counterintuitive paradox that lies at the very heart of all this source material we've unpacked today.
The paradox is this: when you purposefully, deliberately slow down, your life actually becomes remarkably fuller.
It defies the logic of the modern hyperproductive mind. But it is undeniably true. When you relentlessly choose to do less, you somehow manage to experience so much more. You stop frantically skimming the surface of your days like a stone skipping across a lake, and you finally start swimming in the deep waters of your own life.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought. Something to chew on long after the audio stops playing. If human attention is truly the most valuable, irreplaceable currency we possess in this lifetime, and I believe it is, who or what are you unknowingly paying every single time you rush?
Are you paying the tech companies with your divided attention?
Are you paying a corporate ladder that ultimately doesn't care about your health? And more importantly, what priceless, irreplaceable moments could you buy back starting tomorrow morning simply by making the radical, rebellious decision to walk instead of run?
That is the question that had the power to change everything.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us at the table today for this deep dive. We sincerely hope you feel a little lighter, a little more equipped with the nuances of the English language, and deeply inspired to carry this unhurried, intentional mindset into whatever you are doing next. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you these deep dives. Until next time, take a deep breath, count your blessings, and slow your roll.